Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron. This is season 4, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk with thought leaders and experts from all over the world. We're going to hear amazing stories of innovation in education from teachers, consultants, and AI experts and others who are fearlessly innovating and creating unique active learning experiences. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Actually, the play behavior is also fundamental for the birth of our capacity for symbolic thought. Is that because play is about pretending to be something else, pretending that something is not there in the reality. And that capacity is fundamental for language, fundamental for all kinds of artistic expression, fundamental for thinking ahead, fundamental for planning, fundamental for symbolic thinking as well.
This episode with Jussi Holopainen is about game design, but it's about so much more than that. It's about systems thinking and artistic expression, and even about culture and the fundamental development of human intelligence and our ability for abstract thinking. Listen in on this fascinating conversation with Jussi, who has spent decades studying and teaching game design. Let's have some fun. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and today I have with me Jussi Holopainen. Better pronunciation. So
Yep.
Jussi holds a PhD in digital game development from Blekinge Institute of Technology in Sweden. He's been researching game design and gameplay experiences since 1998, having authored or co-authored scores of academic publications and patents. Jussi is a member of the executive board of the Digital Games Research Association and has served as a member of several program committees such as Games and Culture, Game Studies, and CHI Play. So before joining, he's currently at the City University, Hong Kong, or he joined in 2021. Before that, he was a senior lecturer of games computing at the University of Lincoln in the UK in the School of Computer Science. So his latest research is focused on principles of game design, playful design, and aesthetics of gameplay. So welcome, Jussi. It's so great to have you on the show.
Yeah, so thank you, Eric. Yes,
Yeah.
and it is Holopainen. It is close enough.
Holopainen.
Holopainen, yes.
Holopainen. Yeah, that's a little foreign for me. So you're from Finland, is that right? Helsinki?
Finland, not from Helsinki. So
Okay.
originally I'm from eastern part of Finland, near Russian border. But
Okay.
then I spent quite a lot of time in Tampere. So I was working in Tampere 17 years.
Oh, okay. Nice. I finally had a chance to visit that region recently here earlier in the year, and I did get to Helsinki, which was beautiful. So, well, thank you again. I know you had been over there in the summer, and then you've come back here for the fall semester, and you're teaching at City U. So, and you're teaching game design. Is that correct?
Yes, so I teach game design, but I also teach like game studies courses as well. So it's not only about game design itself, but also understanding games as a cultural artifact. Also, what's the nature of games as an art form and cultural form? So how do they fit into the contemporary society and the usual things like that? And then I also occasionally I teach human-computer interaction courses as well. Because I also have some of the background from human-computer interaction and interaction design research as well.
Awesome. It's really fun stuff. And I saw you on a panel at the Games for Change conference here in Hong Kong, which is how I kind of started pursuing you to be a guest on the show because you were just so much fun and so informative on that panel. I just thought it'd be great to have a conversation with you about games and education, right? Because, well, anyway, we'll get going here. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to kind of figure out, so you've been kind of studying, analyzing games and game design, and you got into this thing called game design patterns, but you've been doing this for many years. So what got you going on this? What has kept your interest in it for all these years?
Right. Well, that is a good question. And I have a very short answer, and then I have an extremely convoluted and complex answer. So which one do you want to get first?
Well, give me the short one first, and then we'll poke. Yeah.
Right. Games are fun and fascinating and important, and I think that they are worthwhile studying on their own terms and not just as something like child's play, but because that they are fundamental parts of all human cultures. Like that's the short answer. And then the longer answer is that I have to go back to Eastern Finland, end of 1970s, as I was a young boy then. And I somehow and beginning of 1980s. I think that that's the proper one. Because I was already as a young kid that I was very interested in games and play. Also, like I started reading fantasy science fiction very early. So my mother used to say that I had quite an overactive imagination sometimes. And then in the 1980s, beginning of 1980s, that we discovered tabletop role-playing games, especially Dungeons and Dragons, and then we started a regular gaming group. And well, that was also like that. It combines my love for fantasy and then also my love for games in a really nice way. So it also then got me into like computers were coming also at the same time. So I started programming computers. And at that point of time, when you learn to program computers, home computers, like Commodore 64, VIC-20, and so on, is that you program really small games because they are fun to program, easy to program as well to a certain extent. So then that combination where they became together there as well. So then I also started like programming and designing games at a very early age. I was also like not only playing the tabletop fantasy role-playing game, but also game mastering them. So I was setting them, building the world, setting the rules, sets, and setting the events and characters and so on. And so that then also led to that I played like board games as well, computer games, of course, all kinds of games. Also started to play by mail games, which are like this. At that point of time, we didn't have internet, so we played these complex strategy games with other people, like tens or hundreds of other people, through usual snail mail, so like a physical mail. So you send a letter, and then the people process it, and then they send you a big bunch of paper as a report back, and then you can do stuff. So then some friends of mine, we then designed and implemented our own play-by-mail games as well, and we ran a small company, like offering these play-by-mail games to Finnish players at the beginning of 90s. So that's sort of that I was also like designing and implementing games then. And then there was a bit of a break there because that our company folded for various reasons, mainly that we were young and stupid, but that's another story. I can talk about that one as well.
Yeah,
but it was fun. Also, that it was also like, of course, that running your own company is a lot of work, and it was surprisingly a lot of work. That's why there was some failures there as well. But yeah, then I had a bit of a break. I began as a software engineer for the once extremely big telecommunications company called Nokia in Finland. And at that time, like 1998, that there was an opening in the research center that the Nokia research center was doing all these new technologies and also all kinds of new interactions with these technologies. And they opened a research position looking into like how to use emerging technologies for entertainment. And then I joined that research group and then started looking into that. Okay, so what is entertainment? What's digital entertainment? How do games fit there? How can we use these new technologies at that point of time, for example, online all the time, mobile devices, that was unheard of. And we were doing prototypes and we were trying to figure out that what kind of games would make sense if we had these devices online all the time. We were able to message each other online all the time and so on. And that, of course, that then led into that we're trying to figure out what are the basic building blocks of making games in the first place, or designing games. What matters if you want to make games, because it's very, very difficult to predict future or forecast or think that what could be in the future without knowing the basic systems or the basic components or the units of the systems that you're talking about.
Right.
So and that part of the research there then led into I started collaborating with the other game scholars and interaction design researchers. And that's where we started the collaboration with Staffan Björk from University of Gothenburg at that point of time, if I remember correctly, and Chalmers Technical University nowadays. So we started a collaboration there that okay, what are these basic building blocks for games? Because we also are a bit of nerds there, that we like systems, we like analyzing stuff. So then we started the Game Design Patterns project, very much inspired by Christopher Alexander's work on patterns in architecture. Not so much from the patterns in programming or software engineering, but rather from the architecture side. And then we had like series of workshops around it, and then we started to reconceptualize the patterns approach in the game design, and that's then we published quite a lot about that. We still do sometimes, and then we published a book in 2004 as well, and we have like a big collection of these patterns online as well. We haven't been maintaining it that actively as it should be, but there's still some active research on that one, and some people use it, and I use them as a part of my when I teach game design, that I use them as just like one part is another technique, another method, another conceptualization, another framework to look into games, because at all these different frameworks that they give you different kinds of affordances or access to what is that design knowledge we're talking about. And then so that continued. I was still working for Nokia Research Center. Then I moved into like playful design for again new and emerging technologies. And then we had a big project on pervasive games. It's a collaboration project with several universities, EU-funded collaboration project with several universities, and Nokia was part of it, part of the consortium. There's a really good book about that one, Pervasive Games, Theory and Practice, also. Annika Wärn, Jaakko Stenrus, and Markus Montala, they were the editors of that book. And I continued that one, and then Nokia started to go down, and I also that they started to restrict that or I started to feel that they were restricting that what research should be done in the Nokia Research Center.
Okay.
So that then I decided to move into academia, because it's also that I had been collaborating really closely with academia, and I found that environment would be perhaps more suitable for my sentiment and attitude than corporate research.
Right.
So that then I switched into academia.
Okay. So I want to drill in on one other aspect of this. So you made the comment that games are important. So you clearly still believe this. So why? Why are games important to our culture, and important that students understand the importance?
Yes, so that's also like and again, short answer and a complex answer. The usual thing. So first of all, is that just from the descriptive point of view, is that all human cultures have games. All humans play games at some point of their lifetime, and usually that they play games throughout their lives. Games are more prevalent cultural form than reading, for example. More people play games than read fiction or any kind of any kind of a thing. And then especially here is that I'm talking about cultural forms as a form of expression, and not just as like instrumental cultural forms. Like, of course, reading can be used for that one, but something that is sort of that I think it is fundamentally human and fundamentally part of our human cultures. And then when you connect that to the play, because also the play behavior is connected to games, but there's that connection is let's say very complex, which I will not go I hope that deep today. I want to go deep, but it's a lifelong project to untangle that web. And also is that when you look at the play behavior, is that the evolution of any kind of species, that all mammals play. Some that birds play. Some people claim that even that the reptiles and also insects and fish, some of the fish play. But also that the more higher up, or if you can say that higher up, but more the closer evolutionary that the species are to human beings, the more complex their play behaviors are. And also that there's been some Some talk about that actually the play behavior is also fundamental for the birth of our capacity for symbolic thought. Is that because play is about pretending to be something else, pretending that something is not there in the reality. The play is always, of course, that play happens in the present, but always that play is always something else than what is now here in this so-called real world. And that capacity is fundamental for language, fundamental for all kinds of artistic expression, fundamental for thinking ahead, fundamental for planning, fundamental for symbolic thinking as well. So that's why that I also is that the games are also sort of like a crystallization of that capacity for being not only in the present but also somewhere else, because that you can play allows you to create these different worlds, so to speak, that contradict what is happening, that it can allow it, that play is imagination as well. Imagination is an essential human capacity as well.
Yeah. One of the things I recall, and I apologize to whoever it was my guest was that we got talking about on the show, was that one of the great elements of play, right, is the ability to be other than yourself. So I can play a female character, or I can play a Viking, or I can play, whoever, right, in the game, and I can kind of take on that persona and experience the game from a whole different perspective. And it's really the only forum we have really for kind of doing that. I mean, I guess you could, dress up and, Halloween or whatever, but for most of us, right, games is the one mechanism we have for kind of testing out other perspectives and say other personas.
Yeah, exactly. So the games are exploring different ways of being. That's like
yeah. So, well, of course, the other thing we talk about a lot on this show is that every game teaches us something, right? And so when you get into this kind of games and education blend, right, we have the challenge of saying, what is it the game is teaching you, and can I kind of bend that a little bit to the will of the teacher and say, oh, I want the game to teach you this particular, kind of thing. So tell me about your experience there with kind of game designer or game design that's intended, whether it's on the entertainment side, commercial side of games, or on the more the serious game side. But how much of that do you kind of see or teach, right? That you want to communicate something through the game?
Yeah, good question. Because there's like all games that that teach you something in one way or another, which is also the case that all encounters with the world teach you something as well, which is like that when it goes into that it's so broad that it is, but also that what games are, as I already mentioned, that they are like crystallizations of being in the world. They are crystallizations of intentional behavior, so that they make your thought processes tangible. So they are a way of doing that. So like when you look at Tetris, for example, or that it is an abstraction of how we perceive and manipulate objects in a world. And it is like abstractions of how we perceive and recognize objects in the first place. And that in itself is well, I find it fascinating. Some people don't. So that is also like it is exploring some parts of how we are as humans. So that is one. And in different games that they focus on different aspects of like being in the world, so to speak, and they reveal different things for us as human beings. And the same thing with all art forms. That the different art forms that they focus on different ways of expressing something what is fundamentally human, what it means to be human. Like visual arts, like paintings, that they focus on really about our connection to the world, how we perceive and how we relate to the world in what fundamental ways, how our perception works. For example, that cubism is a good example of that one, that which starts to twist these, which bends the limits of how we perceive. And that's why it's so fascinating in itself. And that goes to the games, that games are about doing the same thing with like the ways of being in the world and the intentionality and agency in the world as well. And so in that aspect, that all games are about illuminating, embodying, highlighting some aspects of being human. And then what happens when you talk about like these educational games and teaching games, or that the games that you want to use to educate or teach or make the players learn something. And then it gets into the muddy waters of like what is the thing that you want the players to learn? Because then you are also trying to instrumentalize the fundamental experience of encountering these forms of art. And that often goes wrong, because then what you want to teach might not be suitable, like structurally or phenomenologically, with the form of games. Like games are to be, so in my not so humble opinion, like that games can be really bad at teaching like facts or teaching something about like that how to perform a certain kind of an operation in the right way. That even though that there's like training games and so on, that is, but I still think that it's not the purpose of games to teach you something like, okay, that is facts, that these factual or instrumental skills, something like that. Although that you can, of course, that do that in sort of an.
Well, one of the books that I read recently, in fact, Video Games and Learning, I've got it right in front of me here, from Kurt Squire. So he references how he realized as a young man that he actually learned a lot about kind of history and geography by playing a pirate game. Because in the game, strategically, you had to kind of figure out, where to go and, all these different ship models and stuff. And the game was based on some fairly accurate historical, models, if you will.
Yes.
And so he actually learned a lot about the Spanish and, say, pirates and ships and geography in the Caribbean and, navigating. Yeah. So they can unintentionally, right? It wasn't the point of the game, but he realized that he actually was learning a lot about something, and he was doing it, as I say, right, without having to know you're learning something somebody else wanted you to learn. That would be the best kind of learning game, is when I'm just playing because I'm enjoying the game, but at the same time, like through osmosis, right, I'm picking up little things. So I think there's a lot of games with that kind of historical perspective thing, right? I'm in a war game and it's World War I, right? And it really is kind of showing me accurate, to some degree accurate, right, depiction of what war was like in World War I, or battles and different components of the history there. So there is that kind of ability to do it even in a game that's designed to be fun. But I think we've all seen the dilemma. So you get a teacher who decides she's going to make a game, and really what she makes is a quiz with some graphics and sound effects, right? And you haven't really fooled anybody. It's not a game, because when you look at game design, right, elements or whatever, right, it's missing all of that. It's just a quiz, right? So this is a real challenge, because you want teachers to be able to do this, to be able to make engaging, fun experiences that teach, but they don't generally have the skills, right, in game design. So, well, anyway, tell me a little bit about your approach to teaching game design. So what do you kind of focus on there, if you can, in a quick.
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, I would like to come back to that question about the learning, about that games that they do afford learning. That I don't deny that one. It's also, so if I may, very, very quickly come back to that one. And what Kurt is saying is of course that that's the case, but then it is like sort of as you said, osmosis, or that incidental learning. is that it is
Yeah.
something that you learn by playing. And it's also what you then have to take into account, that what happens there is that the word osmosis is also implies that it's actually a quite slow process. You learn a lot about like playing some like strategy games, historical strategy games, or historical role-playing games. You can learn a lot about history and how history can work. But then it is also that when you start to look into it, how many hours did you spend playing the game, that then it is like, okay,
Yeah.
so I got this information because I spent 200 hours in this game.
Yep.
So that's also something which is a good thing to remember. Still like that yes, that you can do that, but then you have to be very careful about what you are going to structure. As you said, that the quiz, the teacher make quiz game, that's not the answer. But anyway, coming back to the teaching game design. That was the question. So how do I approach teaching game design? So that it's like, let's see, the best way to describe it is it's hands-on experience. And also hands-on experience through concepts that guide your thinking and design thinking, and also your design process. So when I start to teach game design, that the students, that they have to start making games. Like the first class, they have to start making games one way or another. I used to do quite like lecture heavy game design classes because I think I love lecturing about game design. But then I noticed that it's not very good for the students. So it is rather that hands-on, start to do something, very small design exercises, and each of these design exercises is then carefully designed and chosen to illuminate the central concept for that class. That, for example, if we are talking about, let's say, social interaction between players, that then we design something which highlights some aspects of that social interaction. If we are looking into, let's say, uncertainty in games, that you have to design a game which is based on different ways of expressing uncertainty or different ways of handling uncertainty in games. There are different types of uncertainty as well. So that is also that then you design games together with other people there, and then you test the games right there in the class, which then gives you a much better understanding of very, very embodied, concrete understanding that this is the one of the basic building blocks of how games work. And then, of course, that you have to do this, repeat them with different concepts and so on, so that you can get a better overview of that, what they are. But because there's also like that because like games are extremely complex as well, even though that in the core that they might be simple, but they are so complex that then there are so many different ways of viewing that what is important for game design. And also it's also different from different types of game that you want to make, and also in a different parts of the design process you are focusing on different aspects. So that's why in my game design courses is that I give many different kinds of frameworks or conceptual guidance to understand that what games are and what game design is. And some of them are even conflicting. But then that is also, again, tells you that the games are so complex that some aspects for some games might be in conflict with some aspects of other games.
Yeah. Well, and just to put it in kind of scope and scale for our audience too, right? So I looked at one of the publications on the design patterns, and I believe you identified at this point almost 300 different patterns, sub-patterns. And so yes, the combinations of these patterns that could come together in any game it's massive. So how do you simplify that, for students? Are there particular patterns that are kind of easy to grasp and go, oh yeah, I can make a game that, kind of goes at that in, maybe half a dozen different kind of options, as opposed to hundreds or thousands of different options?
Yes, so like what usually happens is like that, start with the basic building blocks that which all games have to have. For example, that all games have to have things like players. Well, of course, there are also zero-player games, but it's a sort of an academic oddity to talk about zero-player games. And idle games is also one way of formulating that. But anyway, all games have players. So and when you have players, then you have to specify, okay, why are players playing this game? What are their role? How they are? What is their role in the game itself, the game world? Which also goes that all games have a world. Even though the world might be extremely abstract, like in tic-tac-toe, it's a 3x3 matrix, but it's still a world. And then you have to think about what is the role of the players in the world. And all games, I formulate that all games have to have goals or objectives that the players are trying to reach. Without that one, that there's no intentionality, there's no heightened sense of agency, and so on and so on. So that those are, and then the players have to have the procedures, so that they have to have actions which manipulate the game world. Without those things, that you don't have a game. And then one of the goes into more like an experiential aspect of games, that all games, again, in my opinion, should have conflict, some sort of a conflict, some sort of a struggle. Otherwise, if the game doesn't push back, then it's not a game anymore. Like if the game is that you have to push a button and then it says you won, it's not much of a game.
Right.
Or that if you are playing golf and golf would allow you to just pick up the ball and then just drop it in the hole.
Right.
It's not much of a game. So that games are also like artificial conflict as well. So there has to be a struggle, which also means that there has to be some sort of a challenge and also some sort of a way to fail. And of course, in some of the games, like in first-person walkers or more story-driven games, then that those might be quite vague and ambiguous, but they are still there. And starting from those ones, then it is easier to start to think about that. What do I want to have in the game? And then, of course, that one of the most important parts for teaching game design is that the game designers have to think about what do you want the players to experience? What do you want the players to feel when they are playing your game? And that is sometimes surprisingly difficult for especially students who are starting to do game design, to formulate that. What is the thing that I want players to experience, to feel? What is the emotional ride I want to give them?
Yeah.
Because it is always that the game is always a relationship between the player and the game.
Let's take a quick commercial break and plug the human intelligence movement. I do this in every show. It's not a paid advertisement. I'm just a fan of the work that they're doing. The mission of the human intelligence movement is to ensure that all students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI world. You should join the movement. So there's a link in the show notes. Check that out. Now back to my conversation with Jussi Holopainen. We're going to talk about transferable skills that come from teaching game design. We're also going to hit on the impact of AI and the challenges of designing educational games. The fun continues.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I took a look also at Doug Church. I think he was referenced in some of your writing, and then his, what do they call them, the formal abstract design tools. Yeah. And he talks about intentionality, consequences, and kind of story narrative. But he also talks about mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. So yeah, so it all kind of relates back. And for me, again, I try to tie everything to learning and teaching. So one of the things I am curious about, so your students, they're taking this course in game design. Is the assumption that most of them want to become game designers, that this is a critical course in their career path, or are some of them just taking it as a kind of a curiosity, fun, I can get credits for taking a game design class? How do you view your students and your kind of objective for what the student should be equipped with by the end of your course?
Right, yeah, good question, because it depends on the level of the game design course. That, for example, that in our MFA game stream, that all the students that they already have like game design background, they have made games. Some of them have already been in the industry. Many of them want to continue in making games in one way or another.
Okay.
But also in that cohort that there are some that who want to understand games better. And it's also is that to get them design skills that which could help them in other professions as well. So it is that, for example, just the game design is a great way of learning about how to design anything. to be honest,
Okay.
there's similarities with all kinds of design professions or design activities. And then also some take it just to understand games better because they think that they are interested in games, especially in undergraduate courses. That students come to the game design course because they play games a lot. They want to understand games, or they think that game design is fun. And then some of them get really frustrated and disillusioned when they said, "Okay, game design, this is quite hard." Because the game design is a difficult subject. But also like that, I think that yes, some are really there to learn to become game designers. Some are there to learn about games and design in general. Some come there to learn different kind of skills because it is that you have to have different kind of skills and attitudes to do game design. Anyway, and maybe some people come there to learn also about themselves as well. Why do I play games?
Yeah.
Why do I think games are important? Why did I spend more than 1,000 hours playing Zelda Breath of the Wild or things like that?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. One of the things that I think about that I think is very interesting about game design in particular, and so you came from kind of the tech side, so did I, right? I wasn't a programmer, but I was a systems engineer and architect, and then crossed over into the game development side. But to me, it's this beautiful merging of that kind of technical, logical thinking, right? Because you've got to look at a game as a system and all these components that have to work together. But it's also a very creative, artistic, expressive, right? I've got to worry about how people feel and their emotions. And so tell me about that kind of blending and how often do you find students kind of struggling? They're either kind of really in one camp or really in the other, and they're trying to kind of be both at the same time as a game designer.
Because that is, I'm just trying to find, because there's a beautiful quote from Frank Luntz when he talks about game design. I don't remember the exact words, but it's like game design is like building a bridge, making sure that it is structurally sound and composing an opera at the same time. It's like so that you have to have these both aspects. So this is that the technical engineering, the engineering part, the systems thinking, understanding how things work, and also making things work, because it's also easy to make things that don't work, easy to design systems that don't work. And then you have to have that you are trying to express something with your game, that artistic part, that composing an opera. And as you said, is that it's difficult, and that conflict is for some people that it's that they cannot overcome it. Is that they might only think about game design as an engineering problem, or only as an artistic expression. And where was I? So that conflict is there, and it's also that this also then makes it very difficult to sometimes teach game design, because that then you have to have these both attitudes or in you if you really want to be a good game designer. That's why I also, even for like game design courses where we don't have any programming involved, I encourage students to learn at least some basic programming skills as well. Because that is also like if you are, and of course it might be just my background because I have a software engineering background as well, is that because if you are able to program and you have this programming mindset, that you are breaking these things into smaller ones, that you have the software architectures and so on, that allows you to then analyze systems in a very different way or in a more concrete way, and suitable for game design than any other ways of analyzing games as systems.
Yeah.
And that skill of analyzing games as systems and thinking about games as systems is also crucial. So I teach games as systems and systems thinking in all the game design courses as well.
Yeah.
And then you have to be understanding that then how this goes together with my artistic expression, or the one where I want to give experiences to the players.
Right. Right. So how much in today's world does AI help compensate? Right. So if I'm leaning more towards the artistic side, maybe I can get AI to kind of help me a little bit with the architecture, the coding side, or vice versa. Maybe I'm pretty strong on that system side and logical, systems thinking, but I'm not very artistic. Maybe I have a game mechanic kind of, I can put together, but I'm not quite sure how to really make it fun or the aesthetics of it. Can I use AI to kind of help me on that side? Are you seeing that kind of play out? Do you allow your students to use AI?
So I allow my students to use AI, but also that I always tell them that they have to be responsible when they are using AI, and they have to, of course, disclose their use of AI. Because AI is there, it's one of the tools. It would be foolish not to allow that. But also is that what is there at AI can, for example, that you can create concept art, you can visualize your ideas, you can also spin off, do some brainstorming sessions with the AI and so on very easily. And especially for asset creation, AI is in prototyping phase when you want to have assets very quickly and so on. AI can be really, really helpful. Also, as I said, when you, especially that if you are not really artistic and all visually inclined person, then AI can help you visualize your thoughts, visualize your ideas, especially for concept art and so on, very well. I use that also quite often. I use AI sometimes quite a lot, but then when you start to do the so-called real game design, that really putting that system together in order to achieve a certain kind of an expression or certain kind of a player experience. And that is missing. It is, at least from my opinion, that is very difficult to do with just the help of AI. You can, of course, get these overall ideas. You can get help on this, how to break this vague idea into more manageable parts. That AI can be used to help in the process. But then in the end, it is that you have to put them together.
Yeah.
And I have some projects going on where we are really trying to pinpoint those sweet spots where we can also use AI to help in that, the essence of game design, that how we are translating these systems into player experience.
Right.
But that is still very difficult.
Yeah. There's nothing easy about game design. I am so impressed with, the folks I worked with at EA who were designers. And of course, they had a whole nother kind of challenge because we were doing iterative sports titles. So, Madden football had been out for 20 years already at that point, I think, and coming up with new features and new things every year was really a challenge. How much better can you make a game that's been out 20 versions already, right? So yeah, there's all those kinds of challenges, and kind of looking at other games in the marketplace, and inspired, but EA was always saying, we don't want to do what somebody else has already done. Every year we want to do something that's never been done before, right? Yeah. So hard, but just amazing the work these guys would do through that process. And of course, this was before AI can help you with any of that thought partnership kind of thing. So, but talk to me a little bit about, so you've been studying game patterns for long enough to have seen quite an evolution in games, right? And AAA games and casual games and all different kinds of games. Is there a type of game that this really surprised you? So during this time you've been, kind of studying games, and something that came out and you played it and just went, wow, how did they come up with this? This, doesn't fit any model we've looked at before.
Right. So I guess the closest one to that sort of a genre of games called game poems, like these really short, expressive, subjective games, focusing on really some very human aspects of being in the world. And so, like the people who have been doing that, like Jordan Magnusson, Anna Antropy, and so on, that even though that many people that they don't call them game poems, but then that's like a sort of a form or a genre moniker, that these short, very focused, sometimes extremely intense personal games. Like Anna Antropy, The Queers in Love at the End of the World. It's like 10-second game, text-based 10-second game. And it is like striking. It was like something, okay, wow, that within that is also that replayable, of course, that you have to replay it many times. But it's also like the experience that you get, that was something, okay, wow. Or some of the like Jason Rohder's Passage, which was 2008, 2009, like a pixelated 2D scrolling game where you just walk from left to right, but also really striking in it that how these very simple design elements that they come together into creating quite a moving and, let's say, like a moving experience. And some of the games like Loneliness comes to my mind, or Freedom Bridge. And then also like in one of my classes, Art and Activist Games workshop, that one of the assignments has been that people that they have to make these game poems, like one really short subjective games. And some of the things which come from that class, that they make me cry. And I was like, okay,
yeah,
cool. Or I'm just a crybaby, but that's also like that. Some of them are really touching. And that is very different from thinking about these AAA titles or these massive world-building games like Skate 3 or Assassin's Creed series, even though I love those games as well. But for different reasons.
Yeah. A game that struck me, so I wasn't really a gamer when I went to work for EA, right? So this was all kind of new experience for me. But Dead Space, I don't know if you've ever played Dead Space, but so it's a horror in a spaceship, this like abandoned spaceship, and alien zombie creatures, monsters, right, kind of popping out at every corner and attacking you. But I still remember my son was a teenager at the time, and I had brought it home because it was made by EA, and he played it, and then he was like, Dad, don't play this before you go to bed.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So one like Saturday afternoon, I went and I played this game for a few hours, and I absolutely loved it. It was terrifying, but the mechanics worked. I kind of understood it. You figured things out by playing the game, and you kind of learned, how to kill these guys and continue. And, there was always this kind of tension and sense of urgency. And I love that. It was probably the first game I ever played all the way through and beat the big boss at the end. Yeah, Dead Space. So anyway, let me see. What other questions did I have for you? I know there's something I'm forgetting to ask about. I kind of asked about the kind of transferability, right? So what things, maybe you want to elaborate a little more on that. So things that we can learn from the study in game design that transfer. You kind of commented it's almost like kind of designing anything, but be a little more explicit about concepts you can get from games that you could then apply to other kinds of design or problem solving, system design.
Yeah. So the first thing is that like the design process, and the thinking about design as an iteration and also exploration of different ways of handling the problem, and also especially that in game design, this like very prominent is that you don't know what you are going to design. and then that coming that so that this coming the solution and the problem, that they are unknown, that they're sort of wicked problem from the design research, and then learning how to make that journey from understanding that what is the problem you are trying to solve with this design into coming up with the solutions. And that process is similar in many other design and planning activities as well. And then I think that from the game design, especially that if you go to a game design course that where you teach those things, that these are the things you have to take into account when you are doing your design and you're thinking about doing the design. And that process is then transferable to many other domains. I think even for like policy formation, I think that
policy formation. Okay.
Policy, that if you are making like policies for how the society works and so on.
Okay.
I think that we should have more game designers doing those decisions, because it really allows people to think about these systems, and then also thinking about these problem solution spaces as well.
Right. And consequences.
Yeah, and consequences.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yeah, like part of the systems thinking is that, okay, we have this system, how does it work? What does it produce? What are the consequences? What are the intentional consequences, unintentional consequences, and so on?
Right.
And that thinking, I think, is very crucial and also transferable to many other things. And so anything that requires planning would benefit from that perspective.
Yeah.
And especially that anything that requires planning, which has consequences for huge amounts of people, and not only people, but also for the environment and non-human actors in the world and so on, that you should have those skills, because otherwise that you are shooting blind.
Right. So it's a lot of talk. I mean, I've been familiar with design thinking, right, for quite a while. How much does that kind of overlap apply with the way you teach game design and the design thinking principles? That we're seeing a lot more educators are now going and applying design thinking to curriculum, for instance.
Right. Yes. So that's a good question, because I'm sort of trying to avoid design thinking, because I think this is a bit like a buzzword for people to use when they when they are doing something that they don't fully understand, which is also the same for me. But of course there's, let me see that so like principles of design thinking. That can you refresh like which part of the principles of design thinking, because I think it's also quite a big.
I'm trying to remember the exact steps there, but it's like ideation. Yeah, I know it conceptually, but I don't remember the words they use for it. But
so like define, ideate, prototype, test.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Yes. So that those things that yes, that especially that iteration part of it, and then also that trying to define your problems as well, which is also that how these problem solution spaces that they come together, that they are really at the heart of any kind of a design and planning. But then it is that understanding that how they matter and why they matter, and then what are the nuances of these ones, and then it's the important point.
Yeah.
But there are very similarities between this one.
Yeah. So I know we're almost right at an hour already. My, how it's gone by so fast.
Yeah. Futures.
Sorry, where was I going to go with that? I distracted myself when I looked at the clock. It's okay. Is there anything else you were hoping we might talk about that we haven't? Thinking in terms of my audience of mostly educators out there.
Right. So one which I would like to ask you also, that here is that,
okay,
because you have been doing this for quite a long time, is that how do you see games and game design in education? Because I think that you have a better view on that than I.
So, well, for me, it's all about engagement, right? We hear so much talk about students who aren't engaged. And one of the things I love about games as opposed, well, first of all, it's active learning, right? You're interacting with it. You're not just watching it passively or listening to it passively. You have to engage. And so that interactivity, but there's also this whole concept of flow, right? Where once I get really immersed, now kind of time dissolves and, I don't even realize I've been playing the game for 2 hours or 3 hours or 6 hours all night long, with some of our students. But there's a kind of a magical component there that if you can engage that, right, if you can find that in your teaching as well, right, where the students get so engaged that, they don't realize how much they're learning and how much time they've spent, doing this already. And so, yeah, and it doesn't have to be a formal game necessarily. It can be kind of playful learning, Legos. It can be almost anything as long as you're having that discussion. And I loved your comment about process, right? It's not the end product that matters as much as understanding the process. And to me, that's exactly what we should be teaching. It's not about knowledge transfer. It's about getting them to engage in the process and understand that, yes, some of these systems are very, very complex. And I just got to keep playing. I got to keep breaking it down, and slowly over time, right, the more I play, the more I understand. And some of the game worlds, right, are very complex and they're almost overwhelming. Is same kind of, structure, scaffolding, we call it in educational curriculum, right, where something is very complex, but I've got to break it down into small enough pieces. And a lot of games do this inherently. They know how to slowly introduce more stuff so you're not completely overwhelmed. You keep leveling up. And I introduce new tools or new elements or new characters or new challenges as you go at the time when you're ready for them, which is another dynamic I love that games can do, right? They're not time boxed necessarily, right? In a narrative game, I can play in a particular level as long as I need to or want to before I level up, right? Whereas most standardized curriculum tends to kind of force our hand, right? And say, oh, this was lesson 1, and even if half the class is still, I don't get it, we're moving on because curriculum says I got to go to lesson 2 now. So I like games as a way kind of around that dilemma. Just keep playing until you level up. You can play as long as you want. So, all right. Anything else?
Right. Not really. Nothing urgent comes to my mind right now.
Okay.
All right.
Well, this has been wonderful, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. It's a great perspective, and you have a depth of experience there in an area that I'm not an expert in. I've toyed with, I've made some games, but I am not a game designer. So it's great to hear from you and some of your thoughts on how you share it with students.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to this. It was a blast. It was fun, as you said. We are here to have fun. So
yes.
Thank you for that one.
All right.
I did get new perspectives myself too. So thank you for that.
So there's a couple of core concepts I want you to take away from listening to Jussi talk about his experience teaching game design. First, let them play. The benefits of play are not age restricted, and they shouldn't be time boxed, right? Play until you level up, and we all learn at our own pace. Okay. Second point, you don't have to be an expert in game design to apply some of these principles to your teaching, right? Keep in mind that a good game invokes specific emotions, right? Think about how you want students to feel when they play. And if you're helping them design a game, right, encourage them to consider what they want the player to feel when they play. We all need to be more in tune with our emotions, and games are a great way to help develop social and emotional skills and emotional intelligence. All right, I'm Eric Byron. Thanks again for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. If you've just joined us for the first time, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please hit the subscribe and share this episode and the podcast out. We have so much more great content coming. All right. Thanks to all those education innovators out there for doing what you're doing. You are making a difference.